Three bullets shatter the evening quiet as Maya Williams collapses on her porch. The watering can slips from her hands, spilling across the wooden boards as crimson spreads beneath her. Three white men in a pickup truck slow down just long enough to see their handiwork before speeding away, their license plate reading South 1 clear as day in the dying light. Maya's neighbors witness the shooting from behind their curtains, but not one comes forward to help. Fear keeps them frozen as a young black teacher bleeds out on her own doorstep. What happens next will shake this small Georgia town to its core, because these shooters have no idea who they just declared war on. Comment below where you're watching from. This story of justice might be closer to home than you think. Marcus Williams burst through the front door at the sound of gunshots, his work clothes stained with motor oil from another long day at the auto shop. Or at least, that's what everyone in Millbrook believes about Maya's older brother. He drops to his knees beside his wounded sister, pressing his hands against the bleeding wounds with a calmness that seems almost unnatural for a civilian. His voice is steady as he calls 911, reporting the shooting with precise details that sound more like a military briefing than a panicked brother's plea for help. 3 gunshot wounds, 2 to the torso, 1 to the left leg. Victim is conscious and breathing. Perpetrators fled north on Maple Street in a white Ford pickup, license plate South 1. As he cradles Maya's head, careful not to move her spine, a glint of metal catches the porch light beneath his shirt collar. Dog tags. But Marcus quickly tucks them away before the paramedics arrive, maintaining his cover as just another unemployed black man trying to make ends meet in a town that barely tolerates his presence. Sheriff Buck Morrison arrives at the scene with the enthusiasm of a man forced to clean his garage on a Sunday. At 55 years old, Morrison has built his career on maintaining what he calls order in Millbrook, which translates to keeping minorities quiet and white families comfortable. He surveys the blood-stained porch with the practiced eye of someone who's seen similar scenes before and chosen to look the other way. "Looks like a drive-by," he announces to the gathered crowd, though no one asks for his assessment. "Probably gang. These people bring their problems with them when they move to peaceful towns like ours." Marcus watches Morrison's performance with the trained eye of someone who's studied enemy behavior in hostile territories. Every dismissive gesture, every loaded pause, every calculated word, Marcus catalogs it all with military precision. When Morrison suggests that Maya might have provoked the attack by being too outspoken in her classroom, Marcus's jaw tightens almost imperceptibly. But he says nothing, maintaining the facade of a broken man too shocked to respond to the sheriff's casual racism. The emergency room at Millbrook General Hospital buzzes with controlled chaos as medical staff work to stabilize Maya's condition. Dr. Patricia Tien, a Korean-American surgeon who moved to Georgia 5 years ago, personally oversees Maya's treatment with a dedication that goes beyond professional duty. She's seen this pattern before: minorities targeted for violence, investigations that mysteriously stall, victims who receive substandard care from a system designed to fail them. "Your sister is stable," she tells Marcus in the sterile waiting room, her voice carrying both relief and suppressed anger. 3 bullets, but none hit vital organs. She was incredibly lucky. Marcus nods, but Dr. Chen notices something in his eyes that doesn't match his slumped shoulders and defeated posture. There's a sharpness there, a focus that speaks of training and experience most civilians never acquire. "This wasn't random," she continues quietly, glancing around to ensure they're not overheard. "Maya is the 3rd minority teacher to be attacked in the past 18 months. The other 2 left town after similar incidents." Marcus absorbs this information like intelligence briefings he's received in war zones, filing away details that will prove crucial in the campaign ahead. Maya drifts in and out of consciousness over the next 48 hours, her body fighting to heal while her mind grapples with the reality that someone tried to murder her for the crime of teaching children that skin color doesn't determine worth. During her lucid moments, she tells Marcus about the escalating harassment she's endured since arriving in Millbrook 2 years ago. Anonymous notes left in her car warning her to know her place, students withdrawn from her classroom by parents who couldn't tolerate their children learning from a black woman. Threatening phone calls in the middle of the night, always from untraceable numbers, always promising violence if she didn't leave town voluntarily. "I thought I could change things here," Maya whispers, tears streaming down her face. "I thought education could bridge the divide, but they'd rather shoot me than let their children see me as human." Marcus holds her hand gently, his callous fingers speaking of manual labor, though the precise way he checks her pulse suggests medical training that mechanics don't typically possess. "You're not leaving," he tells her with quiet certainty. And they're going to learn that targeting a Williams was the biggest mistake of their miserable lives. Sheriff Morrison's investigation into Maya's shooting follows a predictable pattern of deliberate incompetence designed to protect the perpetrators rather than pursue justice. Despite multiple witnesses providing detailed descriptions of the truck and its license plate, Morrison claims the vehicle was probably stolen, and the registration leads to a dead end. The license plate South 1 belongs to Tyler Brennan, 32-year-old son of city council member Robert Brennan, but Tyler has an airtight alibi according to the sheriff's report. He was playing poker at the Millbrook Country Club with 3 upstanding white citizens who swear he never left their sight. The fact that the country club's security cameras mysteriously malfunctioned that evening doesn't seem to concern Morrison in the slightest. "These things happen," Morrison explains to Marcus with a kind of casual dismissal, reserved for people he considers beneath his notice. "Equipment breaks down, witnesses get confused, sometimes cases just don't have enough evidence to proceed." Marcus nods along with Morrison's explanation, playing the role of the defeated brother who knows better than to challenge white authority in small-town Georgia. But behind his submissive facade, Marcus is conducting his own investigation with tools and techniques that would make federal agents envious. The confrontation at Miller's grocery store 3 days later reveals just how deep the town's conspiracy runs and how dangerous Marcus's enemies have become. Marcus enters the store where Maya usually shops, hoping to gather intelligence about the social dynamics that led to her shooting. The elderly white owner, Bill Miller, has known Maya for 2 years and previously treated her with basic courtesy, but now he eyes Marcus with a suspicion reserved for potential criminals. Word has spread through Millbrook's gossip network that Marcus is a troublemaker who's been asking uncomfortable questions about his sister's shooting. Tyler Brennan and his 2 closest allies, Chad Mullins and Jake Porter, arrive at the store like predators sensing wounded prey. They begin their psychological assault with loud conversations about how certain people don't belong in their community, making other customers uncomfortable while positioning themselves to block Marcus's exit. Tyler deliberately knocks items from Marcus's shopping cart, then spills his drink on Marcus's clothes with theatrical clumsiness. "Oops," Tyler grins with the confidence of a man who's never faced real consequences for his actions. "Maybe you should watch where you're going, boy." The racial slur hangs in the air like a challenge, and every person in the store knows they're witnessing a test of power dynamics that will determine whether Millbrook's unofficial racial hierarchy remains intact. Marcus could end this confrontation in seconds. 3 amateur thugs against a Delta Force operator is less a fight than a brief interruption in his day. His training has taught him 17 different ways to disable Tyler without causing permanent damage, and another dozen methods that would leave the racist permanently unable to hurt anyone again. But revealing his capabilities would compromise the larger mission and potentially endanger Maya's recovery, so Marcus endures the humiliation with the patience of a professional soldier conducting deep reconnaissance behind enemy lines. Tyler escalates the confrontation by getting physical, shoving Marcus against store shelves, while demanding an apology for disrespecting Sheriff Morrison and causing trouble in our town. Chad blocks the exit while Jake films the encounter on his phone, planning to post the video online as proof that they've successfully intimidated another uppity minority into submission. "Say it," Tyler demands, pressing his face close enough that Marcus can smell the alcohol on his breath. "Say you're sorry for causing trouble and promise to take your sister and leave town." Marcus looks Tyler directly in the eyes and speaks with deadly calm. "I'm sorry you feel the need to do this." The non-apology infuriates Tyler, who raises his fist to strike, but something in Marcus's expression stops him cold. It's not fear or submission, it's the look of an apex predator, studying prey before deciding whether they're worth the effort to kill. Sheriff Morrison's arrival at the grocery store reveals the full extent of the conspiracy, protecting Tyler and his allies from consequences for their escalating violence. Instead of arresting Tyler for assault and disturbing the peace, Morrison lectures Marcus about stirring up trouble and warns him that accidents happen to people who don't fit in around here. The message is clear. Maya's shooting was a warning, and the next attack will be lethal if Marcus doesn't take his sister and leave Millbrook immediately. "Your sister brought this on herself," Morrison says quietly, positioning himself so the store's security cameras can't capture his words, teaching those children that they're equal to white kids, filling their heads with dangerous ideas about civil rights and integration. She's a troublemaker, just like you're turning out to be. Marcus nods submissively while his military-trained mind catalogs every detail of Morrison's confession. The sheriff has just admitted to participating in a conspiracy to terrorize minorities, providing Marcus with the intelligence he needs to bring federal authorities into the situation. But first, he needs more evidence, and that means allowing the harassment to continue while he gathers the proof necessary to destroy the entire network. I understand, Marcus tells Morrison with perfect humility. We'll try to avoid any more trouble. Morrison smiles with satisfaction, believing he's successfully intimidated another minority into submission, unaware that he's just provided a decorated war veteran with all the justification needed to bring the full weight of the United States military down on his corrupt little kingdom. That night, Marcus sits in Maya's hospital room as she sleeps fitfully, her dreams haunted by the sound of gunshots and the memory of blood spreading across her porch. His phone buzzes with an encrypted message from a number that doesn't officially exist in any government directory. Command, this is Ghost, Marcus speaks quietly into a device that scrambles his voice through military-grade encryption, arresting immediate background checks on local hostiles and authorization for domestic counter-terrorism protocols. Colonel Sarah Chen, Marcus's handler at Delta Force headquarters, is concerned about his mental state, following what the military officially considers a medical discharge for post-traumatic stress disorder. The PTSD diagnosis is real. Marcus has spent 20 years eliminating threats to American freedom in countries most civilians can't pronounce, and the psychological toll of that service is genuine. But his assignment to Millbrook isn't coincidental recovery time in his hometown. It's a classified domestic operation targeting the growing network of white supremacist groups that pose an increasing threat to national security. The operation just came to me, Marcus explains to his handler. They shot my sister because she teaches children that all Americans deserve equal treatment. This is exactly the kind of domestic terrorism we're supposed to be monitoring. Within 6 hours, Marcus receives detailed intelligence files on Tyler Brennan, his father Robert, Sheriff Morrison, and the extensive network of corruption and racial intimidation that controls Millbrook like a shadow government. The intelligence files reveal a conspiracy that goes far beyond 3 racist thugs shooting a black teacher out of casual hatred. Tyler Brennan is connected to regional white supremacist groups that have been under federal surveillance for planning attacks on minority communities throughout the Southeast. His father, Robert, has been funneling city contracts to supporters while systematically excluding minority-owned businesses from economic opportunities. Sheriff Morrison has been suppressing evidence in cases involving white-on-minority violence while harassing black families who dare to file complaints about discrimination or assault. The network includes the mayor, 3 city council members, the country club's board of directors, and several prominent business owners who use economic pressure to maintain racial hierarchies that would have been familiar to residents of 1960s Mississippi. Maya's shooting wasn't random violence. It was a coordinated message designed to terrorize the entire minority community into submission. She represents everything the network fears. An educated black woman teaching their children that racial equality is not only possible, but morally necessary. Eliminating her sends a clear signal to other minorities that challenging the established order will result in violence, exile, or death. But the conspirators made one crucial miscalculation. They targeted the sister of a man who has spent 2 decades perfecting the art of hunting human predators in their own territory. Deputy Sarah Martinez represents the thin blue line between justice and corruption within Millbrook's compromised law enforcement system. At 34, Martinez is the only Hispanic officer in a department that has successfully avoided hiring minorities for over a decade through carefully crafted qualification requirements that exclude anyone who doesn't fit Morrison's vision of acceptable police officers. She joined the force 3 years ago hoping to serve her community, but quickly discovered that community has a very narrow definition in Morrison's jurisdiction. Martinez has been documenting Morrison's misconduct for months, collecting evidence of civil rights violations, evidence tampering, and conspiracy to deny minorities their constitutional protections. But the internal affairs system is compromised at every level, and her attempts to report Morrison's crimes have been buried by supervisors who benefit from the current system. Her meeting with Marcus in the hospital cafeteria is carefully orchestrated to appear coincidental, but Martinez has been looking for an ally who might have the resources and motivation to bring federal attention to Millbrook's institutionalized racism. "Your brother seems different from most people in this town," she tells Maya during a supposedly routine follow-up interview. "There's something about him that doesn't quite fit the profile of an unemployed mechanic." Maya maintains Marcus's cover story, but Martinez's trained eye has already cataloged the discrepancies, the way Marcus moves with military precision, his calm under pressure, and the subtle signs of advanced tactical training that civilians rarely possess. Marcus begins his campaign against the conspiracy with the patience and methodical approach that made him one of Delta Force's most successful operators. Phase 1 involves intelligence gathering, using surveillance techniques that make him invisible to targets who dismiss him as just another unemployed black man beneath their notice. He photographs Tyler and his allies, documenting their daily routines, identifying their weaknesses, and mapping their social connections with the precision of a military targeting specialist. Tyler's alcohol problem makes him vulnerable to manipulation and prone to mistakes. Chad Mullen's gambling debts provide leverage for financial pressure. Jake Porter's drug use creates opportunities for law enforcement intervention. Robert Brennan's corruption has left a paper trail that federal investigators would find irresistible if properly presented. Sheriff Morrison's civil rights violations have created a pattern that would trigger Justice Department oversight if documented by credible witnesses. Each member of the conspiracy has fatal flaws that Marcus can exploit without revealing his true identity or capabilities. But first, he needs to let them escalate their campaign against Maya, providing him with the evidence necessary to justify the systematic destruction he's planning. Marcus has learned that justice delayed is justice denied, but he's also learned that justice applied with surgical precision creates lasting change rather than temporary satisfaction. The escalation begins when Tyler's crew realizes that their intimidation tactics haven't driven Marcus and Maya out of town as expected. Frustrated by Marcus's apparent submission and emboldened by Sheriff Morrison's protection, they decide to increase pressure through a campaign of targeted harassment designed to make life unbearable for any minority who refuses to accept second-class citizenship. They vandalize Maya's car with racial slurs and death threats, smash her apartment windows, and send anonymous letters describing in graphic detail what will happen to her if she returns to teaching. The harassment extends to Maya's students and their families. Black parents receive threatening phone calls. Latino families find their businesses boycotted, and Asian American professionals face sudden compliance issues with city permits and licenses. The message is clear: supporting Maya Williams or challenging white supremacy in any form will result in economic destruction, social isolation, and potential violence. Marcus documents every incident with professional thoroughness, building a federal case that will eventually destroy the entire network. But he also begins implementing countermeasures designed to increase pressure on his enemies while maintaining plausible deniability about his involvement. Chad Mullen's primary drug dealer is arrested in a DEA raid triggered by an anonymous tip. Robert Brennan's city contracts come under state audit after a concerned citizen provides detailed financial records to oversight authorities. Sheriff Morrison receives a surprise visit from FBI agents investigating irregularities in evidence handling procedures. Tyler's desperation reaches a breaking point when he realizes that his traditional intimidation tactics have failed and federal attention is focusing on his family's corruption network. The careful balance of power that has protected his criminal behavior for over a decade is crumbling under pressure from multiple investigations, and Tyler lacks the intelligence or patience to adapt his strategy to the changing situation. Instead, he decides to escalate to direct violence, believing that murdering Maya will send a clear message about the consequences of challenging white supremacy in Millbrook. He recruits allies from regional supremacist groups, planning a coordinated attack on Maya's neighborhood that will terrorize the entire minority community into permanent submission. The attack is scheduled for a Saturday morning when children will be playing outside and families will be visible, maximizing the psychological impact of the violence. Tyler envisions burning crosses, drive-by shootings, and public lynchings that will restore the racial hierarchy he believes is essential to maintaining social order. He has no idea that Marcus has been monitoring his communications through military-grade surveillance equipment, recording every conversation, photographing every meeting, and preparing countermeasures that will turn Tyler's moment of triumph into a comprehensive defeat that destroys him and everyone connected to his conspiracy. The hunter has become the hunted, but Tyler is too arrogant and stupid to realize that his prey has been stalking him for weeks. Saturday morning arrives with the deadly calm that precedes military operations, and Marcus prepares for battle with the methodical efficiency of a professional soldier who has conducted similar missions on 3 continents. His Delta Force equipment emerges from hidden storage: tactical vest, night vision goggles, encrypted communications gear, and non-lethal weapons designed to neutralize multiple threats without causing permanent damage. But this isn't a foreign battlefield, this is American soil, and Marcus must operate within constitutional constraints that protect even his enemies' civil rights. His mission parameters are clear: document the conspiracy's crimes, protect innocent civilians, and ensure that federal authorities have sufficient evidence to prosecute every participant in the supremacist network. Tyler leads 50 armed white supremacists into Millbrook's minority neighborhoods, displaying weapons openly and chanting racial slurs, designed to terrorize residents into submission. They believe they're conducting a show of force that will restore white dominance, but they're actually walking into a carefully orchestrated trap that will provide federal prosecutors with irrefutable evidence of domestic terrorism. Marcus coordinates with FBI tactical teams positioned around the town's perimeter, maintaining communication through encrypted channels, while documenting every crime committed by the supremacist mob. When Tyler's followers begin threatening civilians and vandalizing property, Marcus emerges from concealment with the bearing and authority of a professional military officer. His transformation from submissive victim to elite warrior is so complete that Tyler's supporters freeze in confusion, unsure how to process the contradictions between their expectations and reality. The confrontation in downtown Millbrook exposes the fundamental cowardice underlying Tyler's supremacist ideology and reveals Marcus's true identity to a community that has spent weeks underestimating his capabilities. Tyler's followers, emboldened by numbers and weapons, suddenly face a single opponent who moves with inhuman precision and tactical expertise that makes their amateur-hour intimidation look pathetic by comparison. Marcus uses non-lethal crowd control techniques to scatter the mob without causing permanent injuries, demonstrating restraint and professionalism that contrast sharply with their chaotic violence. Smoke grenades provide cover, while Marcus systematically disarms the most dangerous participants, using pressure points and joint manipulation to neutralize threats without violating their constitutional rights. The supremacists discover that weekend warrior training and racist ideology provide poor preparation for confronting a professional soldier who has eliminated terrorist cells across multiple theaters of operation. Tyler, seeing his force scattered and his authority challenged, makes the crucial mistake that Marcus has been waiting for. He abandons the main confrontation and heads directly toward Maya's hospital room, intending to finish what he started with her assassination. This decision transforms the situation from crowd control to active threat neutralization, giving Marcus legal justification to use whatever force is necessary to protect his sister's life. He pursues Tyler through downtown Millbrook with the relentless efficiency of a guided missile, no longer concealing his identity or capabilities from a community that is about to learn exactly who they've been harboring in their midst. Tyler kicks open Maya's hospital room door expecting to find a helpless victim, but instead discovers that his target has been transformed into bait for a trap that has been weeks in the making. Maya sits calmly in her hospital bed, speaking into a military radio with the confidence of someone who knows that victory is assured. "Ghost, hostile in the nest," she reports with professional calm. "Package secure." Tyler's confusion turns to terror as Marcus's voice crackles through the radio with deadly certainty. "Tyler Brennan, you are surrounded by federal agents and under arrest for terrorism, conspiracy, and attempted murder." FBI agents flood the hospital corridor with weapons drawn and warrants ready, but Tyler's attention is locked on the figure walking through the entrance with unmistakable command presence. Marcus Williams no longer pretends to be anyone other than Lieutenant Colonel Marcus "Ghost" Williams, Delta Force operator with 20 years of classified missions and a professional reputation for eliminating threats to American security. His bearing is command-level military, his movements are controlled violence, and his eyes hold the cold certainty of someone who has never failed a mission that mattered. "You shot my sister," Marcus says with the conversational tone of someone discussing weather patterns. "That was your first mistake." Tyler raises his weapon but discovers it's empty. Marcus had Deputy Martinez confiscate his ammunition during the street confrontation, using professional tactics to neutralize threats before they could fully develop. "Your second mistake was thinking this was about race," Marcus continues, approaching Tyler with measured steps that speak of absolute confidence in the outcome. "This is about justice, and justice has been hunting you since the moment you pulled that trigger." The revelation of Marcus's true identity hits Tyler like a physical blow as the full scope of his miscalculation becomes clear in devastating detail. The man he humiliated in the grocery store, the broken black mechanic he terrorized with impunity, is one of America's most elite warriors with the authority and capability to destroy everything Tyler has built his identity around. FBI agent Rebecca Torres steps forward with arrest warrants and federal charges that will put Tyler in prison for the rest of his natural life. "Tyler Brennan, you're under arrest for federal hate crimes, domestic terrorism, conspiracy to violate civil rights, and attempted murder," she announces while reading rights that Tyler can barely comprehend through his shock and terror. Marcus shows his military identification for the first time, and the credentials reveal a service record that includes classified operations in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and countries that Tyler can't even pronounce correctly. "Lieutenant Colonel Williams, United States Army Special Forces," Marcus states with the matter-of-fact delivery of someone reciting his grocery list. "I've spent 20 years eliminating threats to American freedom and democracy. Congratulations on making the list." The psychological destruction is more complete than any physical violence could achieve. Tyler's entire worldview was built on racial superiority and his ability to intimidate minorities with impunity. But he's just learned that his primary victim possesses power and authority that make Tyler's pretensions look like a child's temper tantrum. Maya speaks from her hospital bed with the quiet satisfaction of someone who has survived an assassination attempt and lived to see justice delivered with professional efficiency. "My brother protects people for a living," she tells Tyler with gentle irony. "Did you really think he'd let you hurt his family?" Marcus addresses the room with military precision, outlining the comprehensive federal case that will dismantle Tyler's entire support network. "Of course, you find detailed evidence files documenting this conspiracy in my possession. Deputy Martinez has additional witness statements. The state investigation has uncovered financial records, proving corruption and civil rights violations." He turns to Tyler with the clinical detachment of a surgeon explaining a terminal diagnosis. "Every crime you committed, every threat you made, every corrupt official you work with, it's all documented with military precision. Your father's illegal city contracts, Sheriff Morrison's evidence tampering, your supremacist connections across 3 states. Federal prosecutors have comprehensive cases against all of you." Tyler's face shows the dawning realization that his defeat is total and irreversible. "You planned this whole thing?" he whispers in disbelief. Marcus's smile is colder than a winter morning in Afghanistan. "I didn't plan anything," he corrects with professional accuracy. "I conducted reconnaissance, gathered intelligence, and coordinated with federal authorities to ensure that domestic terrorists received appropriate consequences for their actions. This was a counterterrorism operation from the moment you pulled that trigger." Federal agents escort Tyler from the hospital in handcuffs while he screams about his constitutional rights and his father's political connections, apparently unaware that his father is simultaneously being arrested at City Hall on corruption charges that will result in a 20-year federal prison sentence. The coordination is military precise. 17 members of the supremacist conspiracy are arrested simultaneously across 3 counties, preventing communication and eliminating any possibility of evidence destruction or witness intimidation. Sheriff Morrison is arrested at his home while trying to burn documents that prove his participation in civil rights violations spanning over a decade. Robert Brennan's construction company is raided by federal agents who seize financial records documenting systematic exclusion of minority contractors and illegal campaign contributions designed to maintain white political control. The country club that provided Tyler's false alibi faces federal investigation for discriminatory membership practices and conspiracy to obstruct justice. Marcus's intelligence gathering has provided federal prosecutors with a complete roadmap of institutional racism in Millbrook, enabling surgical removal of the entire network without affecting innocent residents who had no knowledge of the conspiracy. Agent Torres approaches Marcus with professional respect, tinged by genuine admiration. "Colonel, your intelligence gathering was exceptional. We've dismantled a supremacist network that has operated with impunity for over 15 years." Marcus's response is characteristically understated. "Just doing my job, Agent Torres. Domestic terrorism against military families activates federal protocols. This was a sanctioned operation from the beginning." The truth about Marcus's mission emerges gradually as federal investigators brief local officials who weren't part of the corruption network. His medical discharge was cover for a classified domestic counterterrorism assignment targeting the growing threat of white supremacist violence against military families and minority communities. Maya's shooting activated protocols designed to protect service members and their relatives from domestic enemies who pose threats to national security. The entire operation was coordinated between Delta Force, the FBI, and the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division, using Marcus's military expertise to gather intelligence that civilian investigators couldn't access. His apparent vulnerability as an unemployed black mechanic provided perfect camouflage for surveillance operations that documented the conspiracy's crimes in sufficient detail to ensure federal prosecutions. Deputy Martinez learns that her documentation of Sheriff Morrison's misconduct had been forwarded to federal authorities months earlier, making her an unknowing ally in the larger investigation. "You've been gathering evidence for this operation since before Maya was shot," she realizes. Marcus nods with professional respect for her investigative work. "Your documentation provided crucial corroboration for our intelligence. Good police work, Deputy Martinez." Maya's students and their families gather in the hospital lobby as news of the arrests spreads through Millbrook's minority communities. Parents who had been terrorized into silence finally feel safe enough to speak publicly about years of harassment and intimidation. Children who had been taught to fear white authority figures see Marcus in his military uniform and begin to understand that protection can come from unexpected sources. The federal courthouse in Atlanta becomes the center of media attention as the largest hate crime prosecution in Georgia's history unfolds with devastating effectiveness against defendants who assumed their local connections would protect them from consequences. Tyler faces 12 federal charges, including terrorism, conspiracy, civil rights violations, and attempted murder, with sentences that could keep him in federal prison for the rest of his natural life. His father, Robert, confronts corruption charges that document decades of stealing taxpayer money and denying minorities their constitutional right to equal treatment under law. Sheriff Morrison awaits trial for civil rights violations that include evidence tampering, witness intimidation, and conspiracy to deny Americans their constitutional protections based on race. The prosecution presents Marcus's evidence with surgical precision. Every conversation recorded, every financial transaction documented, every conspiracy connection mapped. With military thoroughness that makes conviction inevitable, District Attorney Jennifer Walsh delivers opening arguments that frame the case as domestic terrorism designed to deny American citizens their constitutional rights. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this prosecution represents more than individual crimes. It represents America's choice between the constitutional promise of equality and the historical reality of racial terrorism. Tyler's defense attorney attempts to argue that his client was influenced by regional culture and shouldn't face federal charges. But the argument collapses when prosecutors present evidence of interstate coordination with supremacist groups and planned violence against federal officials, including Maya, whose brother's military service makes attacks against her technically acts of terrorism against military families. Marcus takes the witness stand wearing his dress blue uniform with ribbons and decorations that speak of 20 years defending American interests in hostile territories around the world. His testimony combines military precision with obvious moral authority, creating a devastating contrast with the defendants, who spent their lives terrorizing innocent civilians. Colonel Williams, District Attorney Walsh begins, "Please tell the court about the events leading to your sister's shooting." Marcus describes the harassment campaign and assassination attempt with clinical detachment, providing times, locations, and evidence in a presentation that sounds more like a military briefing than emotional testimony. His calm professionalism makes the defendant's crimes appear even more heinous by comparison. Decorated war veteran's sister, shot by domestic terrorists for teaching children about equality. Why didn't you immediately reveal your military identity and request federal protection? Walsh continues. Marcus's answer demonstrates strategic thinking that the jury can easily understand. Intelligence gathering requires operational security. Revealing my identity would have compromised the investigation and potentially endangered other civilians who were being targeted by this conspiracy. Tyler's defense attorney attempts cross-examination, but quickly discovers that challenging a Delta Force colonel's credibility in front of an American jury is legal suicide. "Isn't it true that you used military resources for personal revenge against my client?" the attorney asks desperately. Marcus's response destroys any sympathy the jury might have felt for Tyler. Domestic terrorism against military families activates federal counterterrorism protocols. This was a sanctioned operation to protect American citizens from enemies of the Constitution. The evidence presentation consumes 2 weeks of court time as federal prosecutors methodically dismantle every aspect of the supremacist conspiracy with thoroughness that leaves no possibility of reasonable doubt about guilt or appropriate sentences. Security camera footage shows Tyler's assault at the grocery store and his coordination with armed supremacist groups during the planned attack on Maya's neighborhood. Phone records prove conspiracy across state lines and communication with known terrorist organizations. Financial records expose Robert Brennan's corruption and Sheriff Morrison's participation in systematic civil rights violations. Maya's testimony provides emotional context for the legal charges, describing her dedication to teaching and the community impact of the conspiracy's terrorism. "I came to Millbrook to make a difference in children's lives," she explains to the jury with quiet dignity. "I never imagined that would make me a target for assassination." Dr. Chen testifies about treating Maya's gunshot wounds and the pattern of violence against minorities that she's observed during her years practicing medicine in Millbrook. Deputy Martinez describes Sheriff Morrison's obstruction of justice and systematic harassment of minority families who dared to file complaints about discrimination. Parents of Maya's students detail the intimidation campaign designed to drive minority families out of Millbrook and maintain white political control through terrorism. The defense attempts to present character witnesses for the defendants, but every character reference is undercut by evidence of participation in or knowledge of the conspiracy's crimes. Tyler's sentencing hearing provides Maya and Marcus with the opportunity to deliver victim impact statements that summarize the broader significance of this prosecution for American democracy and constitutional principles. Maya addresses the court with the calm authority of an educator who has survived an assassination attempt and emerged stronger in her commitment to equality and justice. "Your Honor, this case represents more than one family's trauma." She begins with the poise that made her an effective teacher. "It represents America's ongoing struggle between our constitutional ideals and our historical failures to live up to those ideals." She looks directly at Tyler as she continues. "The defendant tried to murder me because I taught children that skin color doesn't determine human worth. That's not just a crime against me, it's a crime against every American who believes in the promise of equality under law." Marcus delivers his statement with military bearing that emphasizes his service to the Constitution and his oath to defend all Americans, regardless of race. "I've spent 20 years fighting America's enemies in foreign countries," he tells the court with quiet intensity. "I never expected to find enemies of the Constitution operating in my hometown, targeting my family for upholding American values." He addresses Tyler directly with the calm certainty of someone who has eliminated more dangerous threats than Tyler could ever represent. "You tried to use terrorism to suppress constitutional principles. You failed because those principles are defended by people who understand that freedom isn't free and equality requires eternal vigilance." Federal Judge Patricia Washington delivers sentences that reflect the seriousness of domestic terrorism and send a clear message about federal commitment to protecting civil rights from supremacist violence. Tyler receives 15 years in federal prison without possibility of parole, effectively ending his ability to threaten minority communities for the foreseeable future. His father, Robert, gets 8 years for corruption that stole taxpayer money and denied minorities their constitutional rights to equal treatment under law. Sheriff Morrison receives 12 years for civil rights violations that include evidence tampering and conspiracy to deny Americans their constitutional protections. 3 supremacist allies receive sentences ranging from 5 to 10 years, dismantling the regional network that supported their terrorist activities. Judge Washington's sentencing statement emphasizes the broader significance of these prosecutions for American democracy. These sentences reflect this court's commitment to constitutional principles and the rule of law, she declares with obvious moral authority. Domestic terrorism will face federal consequences regardless of the perpetrator's race or political connections. The sentences received national media coverage that frames the story as military family protected by federal justice system, creating precedents that deter similar attacks nationwide. Conservative commentators praise Marcus's restraint and professionalism, while liberal voices highlight the systematic nature of the racism that federal intervention was required to address. 5 years after Tyler's conviction, Maya Williams Martinez stands before a congressional committee investigating domestic terrorism and institutional racism, her testimony helping to shape federal legislation that strengthens hate crime enforcement and protects minority communities from supremacist violence. She married Deputy Martinez 2 years after the prosecution, and together they've transformed Millbrook's law enforcement culture from systematic racism to community-oriented policing that serves all residents equally. The shooting that nearly killed me wasn't an isolated incident, Maya tells the congressman, with the authority of someone who survived domestic terrorism and emerged as a national advocate for civil rights. It was part of systematic intimidation designed to deny Americans their constitutional rights based on race. Behind her sits Marcus in dress uniform, now Colonel Williams, following his promotion for developing innovative counterterrorism methods that have prevented 43 domestic attacks nationwide and created training protocols used by federal agencies. The committee chairman asks Maya what advice she would give to other communities facing similar supremacist threats. Her answer reflects 5 years of healing and advocacy work. Document everything, report immediately to federal authorities, and never accept that hatred is normal or inevitable. Remember that there are people like my brother who swore an oath to protect all Americans, and that oath doesn't exclude anyone based on skin color. Marcus adds his perspective with military directness. Every community has people like Tyler Brennan and people like Maya. The question is which ones your institutions are designed to protect and which ones they're designed to suppress. The testimony concludes with the passage of landmark federal legislation, the Domestic Terrorism Prevention Act, requiring federal response to racially motivated attacks against military families, educators, and civil rights workers. Maya and Marcus leave the Capitol building knowing that their trauma has created systemic change that will protect other families from similar attacks. A young reporter asked the inevitable question about whether their story represents broader patterns of supremacist violence in American communities. Marcus's answer suggests that their experience in Millbrook wasn't unique. There are always more stories, he says, with the measured tone of someone who knows more than he can publicly discuss. More families facing hatred, more people underestimating who they're targeting. Maya smiles with the confidence of someone who has transformed personal tragedy into national progress. Sometimes, the person you're trying to intimidate turns out to be exactly the wrong choice. The reporter presses for specific details about other cases, but Marcus deflects with professional discretion. Check the news in 6 months. There's always another Tyler Brennan somewhere making the same mistake. As they walk away from the interview, Maya carries a briefcase full of testimony from other hate crime survivors, while Marcus maintains the subtle smile of someone whose work protecting American families from domestic enemies continues in ways the public will never fully understand. Their story has become a model for federal response to supremacist terrorism, proving that justice applied with precision creates lasting change rather than temporary satisfaction. The final image shows children of all backgrounds playing together in Millbrook's renovated downtown park, where a memorial to Maya Williams honors her courage in teaching equality despite terrorist threats. The inscription reads, "Teaching is the profession that creates all others." Tyler Brennan remains in federal prison, abandoned by the supremacist allies who promised loyalty but delivered only empty rhetoric when federal consequences became real. His father's construction empire was sold to a minority-owned cooperative that employs workers from all backgrounds. Sheriff Morrison's department operates under federal oversight, with Deputy Martinez, now Sheriff Martinez, implementing community policing programs that serve as a national model for reformed law enforcement. Marcus continues his work protecting American families from domestic terrorism, using methods and resources that remain classified but effective. Maya teaches at Millbrook Elementary, where her classroom has become a symbol of American ideals, successfully defended against those who would use violence to suppress constitutional principles. Their story proves that justice delayed may be justice denied, but justice applied with precision creates lasting change that protects future generations from the hatred that nearly destroyed their family and community.